We're going to take a look at Psalm 6. If you have a Tanakh, a Bible, please turn to this psalm and feel free to follow along as I read it in English. For the leader with instrumental music on the Shminit, a psalm of David. O Lord, do not punish me in anger, do not chastise me in fury. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I languish. Heal me, O Lord, for my bones shake with terror. My whole being is stricken with terror, while you, Lord, how long? O Lord, turn, rescue me. Deliver me as befits your faithfulness. For there is no praise of you among the dead. In Sheol, who can acclaim you? I am weary with groaning. Every night I drench my bed. I melt my couch with tears. My eyes are wasted by vexation, worn out because of all my foes. Away from me, all you evildoers, for the Lord heeds the sound of my weeping. The Lord heeds my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be frustrated and stricken with terror. They will turn back in an instant, frustrated. Psalm 6 is included in the Jewish daily prayer ritual in the morning service and in the afternoon service. After we recite the prayer called the Amidah, the silent prayer, we turn to this section called Tachanun, which literally means supplication. And in this section, having to do with both confession of sins and supplication, we include this particular psalm reading, while traditionally we take our forearm and rest our head on our forearm in this kind of manner, almost in a way of feeling bowed low, feeling low within ourselves, feeling somehow subservient and subject to the mercy and compassion of a merciful and compassionate God. I have to admit that I don't really know what to do about this psalm right now, because this psalm contains such a swirl of emotions, and I have to admit, when I read this psalm, I feel somewhat confused by this myriad of conflicting emotions here. We have terror, we have self-inflicted guilt, we have a feeling of anxiety and fear from being persecuted. We have a feeling of deep faith and reliance on God's mercy. There's a sense of a confirmation of faith. The Lord heeds my prayer. The Lord heeds my plea rather. The Lord accepts my prayer. A feeling of certainty and optimism that my enemies will be frustrated and stricken with terror. They will turn back in an instant, frustrated. So you have some sense of assuredness and faith and confidence mixed with fear and terror and anxiety, bordering on paranoia. And I really don't know what to do about this. I think that the writer of this psalm at one moment is feeling stricken with guilt, asking God at the beginning not to punish me in anger, not to chastise me in fury. Obviously, the psalmist feels that he has something to feel guilty about and does not want to be punished or chastised by God. And at the same time, the psalmist feels that he is on the run, persecuted and threatened by enemies, either real or potential. So where I go with this is that perhaps it is that the psalmist becomes his own worst enemy in a certain respect. that there's this fluctuation, this mixing of self-inflicted guilt as well as a feeling of being in danger, being hunted, and being persecuted. And it might be that once our sense of guilt for having transgressed or fallen short or not or missed the mark or whatever we feel we have done wrong, once we beat ourselves up enough and continue to self-flagellate, we become our own worst enemies. We become our own persecutors in a sense. We are chasing after ourselves, and we need to find refuge in something. We need to find some measure of faith and serenity. We need a release and a break, a relief from that cycle of self-flagellation. Where do we find that relief? Where do we find that shelter? The psalmist reminds us that when we are at the height of terror and anxiety, we can find our refuge in our faith and in God. We believe that God is merciful. We believe that God does not want us to harm ourselves emotionally by this ongoing pattern and cycle of guilt. We believe that by breaking that cycle and turning to God in prayer, that God can somehow deliver us from this harmful pattern of emotional pain. And that in itself is a very, very healthy resolve and a healthy resolution. Especially in today's day and age when the world seems topsy-turvy and we feel pursued and persecuted by a pandemic, a virus that has run out of control. If we add to that sense of persecution and fear, if we add to that our own tendency to berate ourselves for not being as we should be or doing what we should do or feeling somehow less than, and if we fall into that trap of excessive guilt, we are simply adding insult to injury, especially at a time like this when the world is beset by this terrible plague. If we're going to get through this, we need to muster up all of our emotional and spiritual strength and courage. Somehow find a way to hop out of that cycle of excessive guilt and negativity and find strength through our belief in a just and merciful God. By connecting with one another, by finding strength in each other's faith, by avoiding negativity and gravitating towards positivity and spirituality, we will certainly and surely, with God's help, prevail. Shalom.